information and briefing session, so I'll hand over to the CEO.
Thank you, Mayor, and welcome everybody. We have apologies from Councillor Johns and Councillor Meyer, and leave of absence from Councillor Boyle. Nick Perry's an apology tonight. He was presenting the community engagement charter, and he's unwell. So Dan, you can take the reins on that one, please.
No worries. Good evening all. I'll give it my best crack with Nick's presentation just to provide you with a summary of the community engagement charter and update of what's going on. And I'll see if I can get this working. So what the charter is a statewide legally backed framework that sets minimum standards for how councils must engage with their communities when making important decisions. Replaces the older public consultation approaches with a stronger focus on early involvement, genuine participation, transparency and accountability. Core ideas of the charter one is to engage early, not late. Communities need to be involved before decisions are locked in, not just asked to comment at the end. It's to be inclusive and representative. So councils now must actively consider diverse groups, First Nations people, youth, people with disabilities in their community consultation. There's a need to be clear about purpose and influence. So engagement's got to explain what's to be decided and how the feedback will influence decisions. The core idea of the charter is to tailor engagement to the project. So it's not a one-size-fits-all consultation. The methods need to suit the community and the issue at hand. The fifth core idea there is to be transparent and accountable. Councils need to show what they've heard and how it's affected decisions. And lastly, to measure and evaluate engagement. Performance needs to be planned, tracked and reported, not treated as an afterthought. The good news about all these changes is that Yorke Peninsula Council's community engagement policy as it sits now has already covered off on quite a number of those points. We already show how we'll consult, and then we engage the community through various means and report back how the consultation went, including any official written feedback. So for us, this change and what's being introduced is more about matching our consultation requirements to the new specifics of the charter, such as having 5 levels of consultation rather than 4. Minor changes for us. What existed before? What existed before? Under the Act, councils used to have to adopt a public consultation policy and consult the community on certain decisions, strategic plans and budgets. However, the Act's now given broader discretion, and what happened was policies varied pretty widely between councils. And sometimes there's issues of late consultation or limited compliance-focused consultation rather than true participation. So what the new charter changes is it tightens up and standardises the obligations to councils. It's these slides have changed around the number. I'm sorry for that. I'm not looking up and reading my notes. I realise I'll go back to this slide. More prescriptive requirements, so clearer rules on when and how a council consults, stronger inclusion obligations, mandatory evaluation, and defined engagement categories and levels. 3 pages, I've got 4. Anyway, we'll have a look. What it means for councils, you can listen. It means new legal and policy obligations. So councils need to adopt a compliant community engagement policy within the transition timeframe. So we've got until the 11th of September, noting that we can't make decisions or delegate decisions after the 8th of September. So we'll be looking to adopt this before. Engagement must meet legislative minimum standards. Otherwise, there's not much change for us. If anything, the next words here, it's reinforced we're already on the right track and implies we're consulting a lot better than a lot of other councils, which is good news. I'd say the team does a significantly well one. He's got here slide 4, let me see. 1, 2, 3. There you go, slide 4. So let's make these earlier notes. The main changes are really around specifics of what type of consultation needs to occur. However, with that in mind, the policy is really a complete rewrite. So when the policy comes to you as a council, it won't have the track changes. It'll be here's the old policy, here's the new one. You'll see the new one will pretty much match closely with the local government model policy. So we've had our community consultation policy. It's been sitting there for a while. It's a little out of date, overdue for review. With this in mind, we knew the charter was coming, and then we did the next step would be the LGA developing a policy around it. So we've added to that. The other thing the team's done in redeveloping the policy, which is being consulted amongst our staff at the moment, is they've looked at other councils that have gone ahead and jumped before and seek to align some of the community consultation methods with other councils in the area. So we're not really out of step, and people who see stuff on Facebook from one council or another council and whatnot know that there's a reasonably standardised approach. In summary, just to close up, listen, we already consult well. We already consult well, and I think the charter shows that because most of the recommendations we've already taken on board and been doing. In fact, we go over and above with those things like our township activation, consultation to show that we're willing to work with our community to achieve outcomes as much as we can and as we can fit them into our budgets. So open for questions. By no means the expert, but definitely have walked alongside the guys that have been developing this work.
Questions for Ken? Ken?
When do you think this will come to us?
I think this will come through the June Audit and Risk Committee, which is the 11th of 1st, so we'll go through the 11th of, so it's got to pass through, you guys, it'll be July for council. So yeah, through Audit and Risk in June, and that's slightly just a couple of days after the council meeting, so it won't come through till July.
Right, thank you, Dan. So we're moving to the budget workshop. You're continuing on.
Yeah, I'll continue on, just start up and then we'll open up and have a look at some capital matters. Just aware we had a bit of discussion around growth for rating purposes last week, and to be honest, there was a question that came from left field for me. I wasn't expecting a bit of discussion around that, so I thought Mike's did a better job of explaining and running through growth and how its inclusion is. So the purpose of this session is to revisit the concept of growth as it applies to rating, and also to consider how neglecting growth can impact financial sustainability. What's growth? Growth occurs when you've got new properties that have been created, which has added rateable properties to a council's ratepayer base. They're new ones that weren't there before. Flip side of growth is that it can increase the need and expenditure related to infrastructure services and programs which support these properties and residents. There's a little bit there from the financial management regulations, which says we need to speak about growth, being growth in the number of rateable properties, not growth in the value of properties. So just to be clear, what's growth? It's growth in the number of assessments. Let's have a look. How does growth happen? Let's look at an example of a subdivision. So there's a picture of Point Turton here. You're going to have to use your imagination in this little bit, but here's a timeline of events. 25-26 year in July, we have a farm that's rated as primary production. So maybe that's paddock out here might be rated as primary production, so it should be because that's what it looks like. But the person who owns that property, let's just say, this is a hypothetical, has decided they want to subdivide it into allotments and sell it off. They've been working on this for a while and they've managed to get it through Land Services, and Land Services creates a new title for 20 allotments in there. In April 2026, we just recently got our updated valuations, so the Value in General provides us estimated values for the next years of rating. And then in June we get the final valuations which we use to rate. When we get to July 2026, that is the first time we're able to rate those new allotments. Even though they were created titles in October, you rate once in the year, the farm was rated, that parcel of land was rated once, now we have 20 new ones with which to rate, so that's an example of growth. So definitely not a double dip, but a first take on all of these new allotments. Here's the maths. Here's the example of a rate increase with growth included. Numbers here are approximate, but we can have a look. Rate increase of CPI 3.7 plus financial sustainability of 0.5%. The council realises it's going to do a 4.2% rate increase in this example. And the calculations are on the side there, so you can see rates from the year before and then the rates proposed the year after on existing properties. What this model does on the right hand side is separates or isolates the rating of existing properties from the rating of new properties. Then we realise we've had new properties that have been created since last year's rating. So an estimate of additional rates to be generated through rating these new properties for the first time provided. This example, an extra 1% is generated, close to $260,000. And that's off those new properties alone. The total general rate of revenue then increases by 5.2%. We've got the increase here, number of rateable properties the year before, and then the number for the new year, 1%. And then when we work through the numbers and we estimate the average rate increase, we can see that rate increase, our average, is 4.2%. Obviously with land values, things move up and down. But that's how it works with including growth in those numbers. If we ignore growth, same scenario, except we're not isolating these properties anymore, we're just going for a 4.2%, and we're forgetting about growth. And as you work through the numbers in the end, what actually happens is that the general rate increase across the board on average is only 3.2%. Effectively what you have is these new properties substituting the rate increase across everyone else. So the burden is being split across more properties. And what happens there is that with these examples prepared, really the difference between one and the other is that by not taking growth into account, council would miss out on, in this illustration, close to $260,000 in its revenue base generated off those new properties. And that, over a 10-year period, if you look at a long-term financial plan, 260 over the first year is going to mean about 2.6 million over 10. That's a significant amount of money to think about not looking at including in the budget and considering the impact of how that plays into things like achievement of strategic management plans for assets. The knock-on effect, not including growth, is the council has historically had low growth. So council's growth has been between 0.2 to 0.5% over the last 7 years. New assessment growth for the financial year to date, so assessments that weren't rated last year but have come online until April are sitting at about 1%. We would expect any new properties from that stage on to increase that number. So the failure to account for growth reduces council's ability to meet the increased costs of servicing a growing community, which includes the requirement to maintain and provide for the replacement of infrastructure such as roads, stormwater and drainage. When a new development comes online, the developers put in the money to put in the road, to put in the curb and gutter, to put in the street lights, which will operate and pay for, and maybe a footpath. Those sort of things become part of the council's asset base. Sure, they've been paid for in the first instance, but the depreciation and maintenance from that point on becomes council's. There's already an additional drag on budgets. Neglecting that does impact those things too. Council's current draft long-term financial plan includes growth assumptions as part of its rating practice over the 10-year period, and that's to fund the service delivery and infrastructure, maintenance and renewals that are required through the strategic asset management plan. This is common practice too. What we do is common practice. Numerous South Australian councils incorporate growth into their rating practice. It's a prudent means of expanding the revenue base to reflect these new rateable assessments. What is very interesting of late is been the fact that a lot of council services are delivered through infrastructure. Over the last few years, we've taken the move to, so we look at what are we funding? We're funding a lot of service through infrastructure. We've taken to reviewing our cost of renewing or indexing our asset base. Now, we talk about rates, there is a concern, and we do look at it in our rates. What we're looking at is doing a rating model that has a CPI increase plus a financial sustainability levy, and then looking at how growth also impacts us as well and trying to cater for that. Many of council's costs do not move just by CPI. So I even take growth out of the picture. Many of council's costs don't, and infrastructure renewal certainly doesn't. On the 1st of July 24, our indexation for assets was 14.15% cost increase over 2 years for land and buildings. For 12 months, our CWMS water, stormwater and transport asset replacement costs were indexed at 6.13%. That's just in a 12-month period. Roll forward to the next 12-month period, we're looking at 4.57% increases at 1 July last year. Now we're going to move on, we move into the new year, and we all know what's happening with costs at the moment. We're going to index again on the 1st of July 2026. But these are current assets that are in place that I guarantee that will be above CPI. By including growth in, we're looking at incorporating that growth and reflecting that growth in our rating. We have significant assets in place already that are delivering service to the community. We've got an asset management plan that has considered deferral of renewal, so we are trying to afford what we can without doing anything further. I would commend the consideration and the inclusion of growth in our rating model moving forward, as many councils do across the state, because they know if you neglect it, where does it come to bite you? It comes to bite you on this thing, providing services to the community and renewing the things you already have, let alone doing new things. Happy to take questions.
Councillor O'Connor?
No, I must be grateful. Thank you for that. I just assumed that was all part of it anyway. That the actual growth would be just part of your rating increase, and that helped the whole situation with the council's funding. So why has this come up now as a thing where we've got to consider it for it, or not consider the growth?
Well, this is over the last, I've probably tracked it over the last maybe 7 years. It's been quite small. So Yorke Peninsula has not grown historically. Rateable assessments. It started to creep up over recent years, and we've got to around that 0.5%. Over the last few years, we've been looking at our ratings. We did our rate review. We brought in the heavy industry, and that gave us a tremendous boost in that year. We brought in the vacant land changes, which gave us a boost as well. We've looked at it. We did through some of the things, look at how is our primary production rates compared to other primary production rates in the state. We discounted heavily in our area, and we haven't really touched that. We made some changes and put some percentage increases, but it really hasn't moved the needle on bringing us closer to average rate pay base. Now we're starting to hit 1% growth and more, potentially with new businesses moving into the area. There's developers looking at, land prices has gone up. We are starting to experience that, more developments coming online, more people moving in, and I think that's only going to continue. And I think now that it's moving up around that 1%, you've definitely got to start to look at it. In the days of 0.2 or 0.3%, we've got along, but I think it's a neglected long term would be to our detriment.
Councillor Stock?
Thanks, Daniel, for that. I'm just wondering, just to clarify, if there's a subdivision, then are those subdivided blocks, say, not rated or valued until the following April?
Yes, until the following year. So you rate once in a year, so we usually rate in July, you rate at the start of the year to get it done. That land that's existing at that point in time is rated. If it becomes subdivided in a year, those assessments are created and they might be transferred to various people, or they might sit with the original owner of the land or whatever, but they're not rated in that year they're created. They're only rated for the first time in the following year.
Right.
And we get the first lot of, our first look at the values is in April, and every week from April the value general updates things and gives us until we get to June to go, here's how the values moved in 12 months. But yeah, the first take at that growth is the year after.
Right, so that's essentially why we're adding that 1%.
That's
because
why.
we're not actually getting the benefit of those individual rated properties.
Yeah, not until the next year.
The following year, there's
Yeah.
that lag.
Yeah, and it's historically been low, so we haven't put
Haven't
it in
worried
there,
about
but now it's coming up, you know, and stuff like that. We can see, that our asset base increasing, costs increasing. We need to consider it. We've got, neighbouring councils in the north that are growing tremendously in size, and we're getting into that as well. So we need to really look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll hand over to Matt to start something through capital budget.
Thank you for that explanation, Director. That was excellent. I know that we had a few discussions about this one. No.
I was going to say, sometimes I can predict maybe what questions will come, but last week I think I was a little thrown, so thanks for giving me a second take and explaining it. It wasn't up to scratch last week.
So I don't have any, new documentation or anything or project listing this week, a bit of an extra session. So what this does give the opportunity to do is just revisit the bottom line of the current capital budget that we have factored in for 26, 27, and then just note the list of projects that aren't included as well, that have been considered and have been in your briefing materials. So as it stands, the capital budget has been drafted with a project listing to fund that is $30,000 under the allocation in the long-term financial plan. So within very, very close to budget. So any projects to come into funding consideration, if we're going to stick with that rule to work within the means of the LCP, we need to consider what will come out as well. So we've been through that list of the projects that are in. So if something's coming in now, something needs to come out to try and balance things off. One of the takeaways that I had from the last meeting was the discussion around the pines and the stage there as well. There's a preference for stage 3. There was a good consensus, and Andre had done some more work on that. That's $180,000 additional budget that would be required to meet that as well. So we would therefore be looking for, it would be over by $150,000. We'd consider a reduction in that, equivalent budget in capital, which is effectively a reseal component. And we would come back and make sure that the draft budget would be within the appropriate allocation along the LTFP. Now I've reprinted a listing for everyone, just to, if we wanted to look it up at home. But the first couple of pages there are the projects listing that's out to the orange and red marked ones. So half a dozen orange ones there, which I'll talk to a little bit, and then the reds are all included as well. So it should be turning over that from that front table summary, a listing looks a bit like this. Now these projects, although they have merit, there are funding limitations. So these have, included for more of the being considered in the budget, but within the various allocations for these types of works, they're just sort of out of being able to be funded from within within our current budget allocations. For instance, the first one on the list is Bluff Road Reseal, which, despite being a priority, the reseal budget's largely committed with the works required on White Road, and and some of the township ceiling as well. Yeah, might also mention that the costs likely to be quite a substantial bit higher than what's included there. It's sort of more like a $2 million budget requirement as well for that, but still a key project. And the main reason being that I haven't driven down that road, but I think the shoulders need a fair bit of work to bring it up to spec and widen the road while it's being resealed as well. So yeah, the budget allocation for that type of works is $2.7 million worth of widening roads being funded this year. Sorry, in 26, 27. The next couple of roads there as well are considerations for the patch sheeting program as well. So the map that we provided with the pack, I haven't reprinted it this week, apologies, but that includes a list of the priority works that will be considered by the patching teams for renewal, and these two are within those lists to consider as well. And the bonds is in here as well. Now that is included in the budget as well. So, and a couple of other community project proposals there. New toilet block. We've got quite a few.
So council, just hardly did call me yesterday just asking for an update on where that's at. It requires, Dustin might be to say something, the public notification in terms of the development application. So I did relate to the Brokers Association that we wouldn't consider a project that hadn't had approval to go ahead. It's not approved before council, and that process will have some objectives within 9 p.m. from some of the feedback that we've received. So ultimately go back to the cap, Dustin, and that process in itself. While the project has merit and they're putting up some significant money, it's about $40,000 plus the income work. We probably wouldn't know the outcome of the DA possibly until August. Something like that. Would you like to make a comment?
I'd like to thank you, Andrew, for the opportunity. Yes, the community consultation, pending a response back, or I guess an objection of sorts, would trigger an extra few processes for the development application. So number one, obviously the opportunity goes back to the applicant to address any of the concerns that are raised by adjoining owners or locals in the area. Then a planning report would have to be done to get to the following CAP meeting. Obviously we only have 1 month, so depending on when these processes come through, that you can string it out for at least sort of 2 to 3 months, depending on when the dates fall.
Councillor, I just thought it was important to sort of update you the question as to why it hasn't been considered, it just hasn't got approval yet. And they were fine with that explanation too, by the way.
Is there any way that we can look out for things like a new toilet block? We're looking at an estimated budget of only $50,000 or something like that. In previous years, we've sort of tried to upgrade those types of amenities across the board. I'm having a look, and it doesn't look like there's too many areas that we can squeeze, but I'd be interested in some feedback from the staff on that one.
I'll take that one and send it back to you.
Appreciate that, Ian. I'm sure you'll be able to find that somewhere.
I guess short of going through them all line by line, for a lot of that red line there, what goes coming in, everything else coming out. So yeah, there's a number of projects here, varying amounts, a lot of upgrade and new. So these are adding to our asset base generally. Yeah, so if there's any questions, or do you just answer them?
Was there anything in particular, councillors, that you wanted to pull out? Perhaps if we go section by section
I was just going to mention there's a couple of smaller items that are a historic blacksmith's site at Brentwood and War Memorial Picket Fence at Brentwood. They might be able to be considered through the community grants scheme perhaps. So the community groups must have submitted a budget request, I guess through that progress avenue, but perhaps if we can let them know that that amount would be, something they could pursue through that other avenue, just so that they're not left sort of hanging.
Absolutely, great idea. I think we should get together with that team.
Make a note there too, and what we will definitely do is make sure the community groups that have submitted bids there'll be communication with them as to whether their bid has been included in the draft annual business plan or not, and where we can see other avenues for them applying for things, we'll encourage them that way as well.
Yeah, there's quite a few there actually, like Point Turton, fish cleaning, I think it was, or fish cleaning stairs, and there's another Titty Witty beach progress sign. So there might be quite a few in there that we could direct to community grants perhaps.
Definitely. I was just thinking up above, sorry, I didn't manage to bring my paperwork with me tonight for this, but there was a couple of those red ones there, particularly around Point Turton, that were actually, groups submitted bids, but they were also approaching the state government as part of the Alba Bloom grant. So I believe some of those Point Turton projects actually have been, not all of them, but a couple of them have been taken up and incorporated into funding from the state government that they've already received. So those works will get done, and council doesn't need to fund them. We may need to look after them in the end, eventually, but we don't need to fund them up front. So we'll definitely update the list to reflect that.
I might just put a bit of something put together for me. We were reviewing, it's not necessarily listed everything that's on the sheet in front of you, but these are the grants that have been approved. There was Port Clinton Shade Sales, Port Julia Playground, Port Vincent Playground, which we have included, requiring contribution, Cabowie Caravan Park Playground, Marion Bay Fish Cleaning Station, Point Turton Shelter, our Unlimited Space Project. So these are projects that were successful in getting funding.
Is there any other items that are jumping out there? Those are significant large ones that just, we know it can't be done. They're quite obvious, but community's been interested in that. And if it's not, then we're quite happy to, from a finance perspective, to take the budget as is and consider that the draft for the annual business plan preparation. So we've already managed to balance it. So the team can move on and continue working the operating side of the budget, be able to bring what our ordinary operating looks like, and then whether the scope to fit in some operating projects that have been budget bids as well. So if the council's happy generally with that, that's not a decision-making meeting, but if there's general consensus on what's in and a basic to decide, we're happy to move ahead. Call the meeting.
Dan, I'm just not real clear with what you're asking. So you said before with the Pines changes were 150 grand over the budget, but then you're suggesting that we potentially could squeeze more into the budget.
No, sorry. So what we're looking at now is a capital budget, so the capital works budget, and the LTFP set aside certain amounts of funding that we're trying to balance back to in that regard. So this phase of it might not be explain the process well enough, but yes, at the start of the meeting, Matt alluded to the fact that by including Pine Stage 3, we're about 150 over, and he did say we'll probably balance that against the reseal, so we'll reduce the reseal budget by 150, the capital budget balance. What we intend to bring to you next is obviously some rating models, so we can have a look at rating, but then also our operating side of the budget. And so we'll look at the operating side of the budget. There are sometimes some community groups and bids that have come in internally that have some operating items that may want to go into that as well. On the operating side, we've also got to try and stick to the LTFP requirements, and factor in some of the cost increases that, have become about, fuel and whatnot, to see whether there is any allocation there. It might not be, we might be coming and going, I'm thinking, this is general practice and we can't squeeze anything in that's an operating project anyway.
So most of these would be considered operating, wouldn't they be capital, some of these?
These are all capital items.
Yeah.
So we might consider another small list.
We don't have room for any more capital.
No more room for capital, If you unless you take something out, that's it,
Right.
or something else back in.
Because many of these are worthy, right, like communities putting forward.
Yeah, it's
So,
very hard. We can do everything once.
but it's important to stay along the long-term plan. So
It is really,
it's balanced. To me, that's where we're at.
Yeah. And so, we've made projections moving forward. We're probably spending a little bit more on a new rather than renewal than the long-term financial plan has, and that's always the struggle. But from a cash perspective and spend perspective, we're staying within those bounds and then looking to balance up our operating budget afterwards.
So, any other questions for Matt or Dan, Dustin? No? Okay. All right. Thanks everyone again for coming tonight, especially the council meeting. Also just finish off the work through on the capital side and away on the operating and some race modelling, and we'll regroup in the next couple of weeks. Looking after the next council meeting. And we'll have some possibly next week. Those rolling your eyes. All right, we'll let you know.
Yeah, we'll let you know.
All right. Thanks everyone's closed. Oh, in general business? Neil?
Actually, just one thing.
Okay.
I was just wondering, we may have already done it, but I was wondering if we could organise some flowers for the Hortons family, perhaps, and a card from the elected members.
We could, yes, we could, if we could all chip in.
Yep.
Yes, the policy excludes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so if we could all make a cash donation, happy to coordinate it and go that way. I'll talk to you after the thing.
Yeah.
That's all right. And yeah, thanks everybody. Appreciate you